The November 29, 2011 meeting of the Human Services Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Andrews? Mr. Daniele? Ms. Cayley? Mr. Lightfoot is excused. Dr. Quattro? Mr. Rocco? Chairwoman Draw.
Here. I believe we have a number of speakers tonight. Madam Clerk.
When I call your name, please use the center aisle to address the committee. Come forward and address the committee. You will have 2 minutes for your remarks, and we ask that you kindly conclude your remarks when the timer sounds. Our first speaker is Elizabeth McDade. Hi.
Hello.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
We'll distribute those tomorrow. Thank you so much. You're welcome.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth McDade, and I work for the Coalition to Prevent Lead Poisoning. I'm here tonight to speak to you about the importance of Monroe County continuing the current $224,000 level of funding to assure that families that live in high-risk neighborhoods will have housing inspected to make sure they do not contain lead-paint hazards. In the past 10 years, our community has seen an 85% reduction in the number of children reported with permanent brain-damaging levels of lead. 85%. We get calls from across the country asking how we did it. We tell them that this community came together, agreed that primary prevention strategies are the only way to prevent a child from being poisoned by lead, and recognized that this devastating public health hazard was solvable through evidence-based and efficient collaborative efforts. Lead affects a child's cognitive and behavioral development, can make a child aggressive, and is strongly related to future productivity and expected earnings. Waiting to repair housing after a child is poisoned is inhumane as well as inefficient. Recent research at the U of R indicates that over 90% of the children who have been reported with lead poisoning in Monroe County live in 1- and 2-unit homes in high-risk areas, and most of the families who receive assistance from the county live in these areas. The City of Rochester has continually analyzed their inspection reports and the locations of lead-poisoned children to fine-tune its approach. In the past year, the city made significant changes in the implementation of the lead ordinance in response to this data-driven analysis, allowing the city to vastly increase its cost-effectiveness while concentrating efforts on the homes that are at a high risk to children. If the costs of proactive lead hazard controls are seen as prohibitive, the cost of inaction will be significantly greater and will cost taxpayers even more money in the long run. Research points conclusively to the social and economic benefits of lead hazard control. Increased health care costs, increased education costs, and lower lifetime earnings, and increased violent criminal activity and risk-taking behavior are all things that can be evidenced, have direct evidence to lead poisoning. We ask that the county continue their outstanding leadership to prevent childhood lead poisoning by sustaining their financial support and meeting with city and community groups to identify efficient strategies going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Our next speaker is Wendy Lowe.
I am a city resident, a landlord, and a mother who has known 4 children with clear ongoing effects of lead poisoning and 4 others with elevated lead levels above 20, I think it's micrograms per deciliter, what's considered poisoning. Waiting for the doctor to detect lead poisoning is like using our kids as canaries in the mine. $200,000 about to perform the inspections is a small price to pay for almost 300 preventions when you consider all the costs, medical and social, of treating and remediating lead damage to kids. What would you pay to protect your child from brain damage? What about your neighbor's child? What about the child who sits beside your child in class? If protection of innocent children is not a top priority, then I say we are not a civilized society. This is not just a city problem. This is a county health problem that stems from county history of abandoning certain housing to renters and the poor. This is a national disgrace that stems from the success of lead miners in lobbying Congress not to ban lead paint for over 50 years after the rest of civilization had said no more poisonings. Inspection is a key tool in prevention. According to in-depth analyses, every dollar spent on controlling lead hazards results in a return of 17 to 221 in reduced healthcare costs, higher lifetime earnings, tax revenue, reduced spending on special education, and significantly reduced criminal activity. Please reinstate the county effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Herman Cologne.
Hi, good evening. I'm a landlord in the city. I have roughly 113 units. I wanted to talk a little bit about the landlord perspective on this issue with lead testing. I don't feel that it's something that is completely necessary at this point any longer. I'm going to go through some of the points that the Lead Coalition has made. One is continuing the current $224,000 in funding from DSS. Again, it's not just $224,000. It's actually $444,000 when you include enforcement. You include the placement from shelters because there's delays that they have to encounter because we're not placing these folks and we're waiting for results. The true cost of the program is probably closer to $1 to $2 million, not $224,000. Requiring all housing-assisted taxpayer dollars to have a city inspection every 2 years, or C of O. Why do you want to punish landlords who accept social services? Again, you're going to increase landlords that don't want to accept social services. We already have overregulation at every 3 years. Right now I'm at every 3 years for a C of O, and it was every 5 years. It's just too much to ask. The city's inspection program is extremely cost-efficient and nationally recognized model. Absolutely wrong. Okay, absolutely wrong. 6 weeks delay is what the program was truly costing everybody, including myself, to place people in our apartments. Lead-poisoned children are 6 more times likely to require special education, 7 more times to drop out of school, and more likely to engage in criminal activity. How do we know this? How do we know that it's not that there are other factors such as lack of jobs, poor school systems, hanging out with the wrong crowds, poor parenting? Why is crime not down if this program is working so well? Our community's past collaborative efforts to address lead poisoning have resulted in an 85% decline in children reported with lead poisoning, 290 children in 2010. Again, look at the results. Has the program accomplished its objectives? Do we need to continue funding the program? During tough fiscal times, local governments don't have the luxury to throw taxpayer money at a problem and not evaluate the results. I'm just repeating what the county spokesman has said, and I truly agree with that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Joan Roby Davidson.
Good evening. My name is Joan Roby Davison, and I am a member of the Coalition to Prevent Lead Poisoning. I've also worked for more than 20 years in various city neighborhoods and on state and regional efforts around fair housing and affordable housing. I'd like to ask you all to think about 290 children beginning kindergarten in just a few years. 290 children who are lead poisoned that we know of last year in Monroe County. We know that the incidence has apparently been decreasing because we've been testing. We've been testing children, we've been testing houses. But that's 290 wiggly kindergartners, or maybe 500 because only 40 to 60% are actually tested. That's at least 10 kindergarten classrooms full of children who may need costly special education. I found out a few years ago exactly how costly that can be. And in the city of Rochester, I'm not going to debate costs, but I do know that when we evaluated it a few years ago, it could go as high as $65,000 per child per year. The cost of doing nothing and of cutting this funding out will greatly increase the number of children in those classrooms in need of special education. It is no question that a great many people have worked to reduce the numbers over the years. The County of Monroe and the City of Rochester have worked incredibly well together. The County Department of Public Health has been amazing. Property owners have worked hard. This is an issue that, however, that will not go away. $224,000 from this particular funding source, along with the other funding that the county provides, is minimal when you compare it to the cost of irreversible harm to children. There have been studies done on the impact of lost wages as a result of this harm, and I can leave a copy of one of the studies with the clerk to make copies for you. But just let me summarize it. In 1999, the year that the data was available for the study, for New York State, the cost of lost wages assessed was close to $800 million for 1 year. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Our next speaker is Chris Woodmayer.
All right, good evening. So why would they do that is what one of my students asked me this afternoon when I explained why I was concerned that I got my tie dirty, and I told him what I was coming to do tonight and why. He's one of my 7th grade students at the World of Inquiry School at school number 58, and he asked me with a tone, not with a tone of wondering, but he asked with a tone of confusion at why when people can help others, they would not. At 12, he understands that lead is a dangerous poison, and he also understands that service and compassion are our duties as members of the community. As a teacher in the city school district, I see students work hard every day. And I feel deep sadness when I work with students who struggle as hard as they possibly can to learn and maintain basic classroom behavior only to find themselves failing. I'm sad because often they do not understand why life is so hard for them. I'm sad because the poison in their home has robbed them of their health and their ability to be successful. I'm sad because lead has robbed them of their ability to understand the reasons when their teacher asks them, "Why would you do that?" All of this, however, does not make me as emotional as the thought that our community has the ability to help these children, their brothers, their sisters, and the children of the children that I'm teaching now. We've been helping them, and it has given me faith that the members of our community living outside of the city have some level of compassion for the children who are born into circumstances they cannot control. I'm asking the county, not as legislators, but as people who can show caring for diverse people, to not allow children to be poisoned by lead. You cannot remove funding for the lead testing program. The removal of funding means nothing less than stealing the future of children by allowing them to live in homes that are slowly poisoning them. Why would you do that? Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mary D'Alessandro.
Good evening, I'm Mary D'Alessandro. I am a county taxpayer, and I am president of the New York State Coalition of Property Owners, and I am here to speak both for myself and for the coalition. We support the county's decision to stop funding to the city of Rochester for continued lead inspections. The facts support Monroe County's decision. Let's give the real facts. That in 1994, 6,340 children were poisoned, and today that number has been reduced to 290. That effort was through the work of the housing providers in Monroe County. Had nothing to do with the city lead ordinance. The numbers were already coming down. The coalition admits that the numbers were already coming down. Now, inspections of houses are not going to solve the problem. What is going to solve the problem is the parents taking care of their children. We have taken care of 95% of this problem. The parents need to clean their houses and keep their kids clean. The Lead Coalition says interim controls only last for 2 years. How many people in this room paint their whole house every year, every 2 years? Their living room, their bedroom, their kitchens? I don't. There's no need. The city's use of dust wipes is not supported by EPA standards. Dust wipes are used as a measure of cleanliness after abatement. The city uses our tax dollars to do dust wipes in units where children don't live and where paint has not been disturbed. It's ridiculous. The issue of protecting children's futures by eliminating lead hazards, we did that. Our country, our state, and our city is financially unsound. Now we need to protect our children's futures by not overburdening them with unnecessary spending. It is now time to protect all children's futures, not just a select few. We've already done that. No more support should go to the city. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Michael Hanley.
Good evening. My name is Michael Hanley. I'm an attorney, and I've worked with county health officials and the city folks and the coalition and landlords in helping to make a fashion and effective, smart lead law, and that's what this community adopted 5 years ago. We think the plan was as effective as has been shown over and over in various studies, because it was lead poisoning is a health problem that calls for a housing solution, and there was no city health department. And the county didn't have the resources to do the inspections that are necessary to find hazards before kids are poisoned. So this mechanism was an ideal mechanism for actually getting into those units. The county needed a way to make sure that the families that it's assisting through its welfare programs weren't going into housing that would be paying rents through taxpayer dollars that had lead hazards in it, and the city needed a way to get into those units. The program that was set up was an ideal mechanism for doing that and is really a model for the country. The problem is that now the social services budget there's been a proposal to cut the funding that's needed to get into those apartments, the only way to prevent those kids from being poisoned. And we know that 90% of the kids that are poisoned are in the 1 and 2 unit buildings that this program reaches, and most of them are at public assistance. The numbers haven't gone down. The problem isn't over. The problem is still huge. There's identified last year were 297 kids. And all the kids weren't screened, so that means we've estimated that the actual number is closer to 400. Even though the funding that was provided last year is still available till next summer, in the middle of last year, the county cut off the inspections for the welfare units. And it's since then that the numbers have not gone down and, in fact, have increased. It'll be very interesting to see what the 2011 numbers look like, and I would urge you to try and get a reading on those numbers from your staff before you make any final decisions on the program cuts that are proposed. This is not about the QHI program. Lead inspections were just a small part of that program. We don't need a QHI program if that was inefficient to do these inspections.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kathy Lewis.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Lewis. I live in Rush, New York. I'm also a taxpayer. And I am also a member of the Coalition to Prevent Lead Poisoning. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here tonight. I first became aware of the facts around childhood lead poisoning around 8 years ago when I was working for the United Way. The need to take a preventive approach seems so clear. There is no cure for lead poisoning, but it is 100% preventable, using means that were and are well known. The consequences of lead poisoning are serious, lifelong, tragic, and costly. Joe Calabrese, who headed United Way at the time, said to me, "If we don't fix this one, God will get us." Well, working together, the Rochester community made lead history by putting in place systems designed to find and fix lead hazards before children are poisoned. Doing this required that everyone pitch in. At our community Lead Summit in June 2004, over 500 interested community members. 500 interested community members. How often do you see that? Came out and celebrated as County Executive Maggie Brooks, then Mayor Johnson, school superintendents, town leaders, health insurers, realtors, and many others pledged to each do what was in their power to end childhood lead poisoning by 2010. And they did, each one carrying out his or her pledge. A key piece to the county's role has been to provide for inspections of housing that is subsidized by the county for public assistance recipients, a group with very high rates of lead poisoning. And since then, the number of children being lead poisoned has dropped dramatically. So, can we say the job is done now and pull back? The resounding answer is no, for several reasons. First, our approach has used interim controls, which are not permanent. Research says they need to be monitored periodically. So why did we take this approach? We took it because the total cost of lead abatement is prohibitively high, and we would not have gotten where we had without this. I'll just summarize by saying our community success has been recognized around the country, has helped us to leverage grants, such as our recent $3.6 million community transformation grant from the Center for Disease Control, which we got in part because of a recognition of our ability to work together, city, county, public, private sector, citizens working together to solve a problem. So I urge you to continue to play the county's role in solving this problem, which is not yet solved, and continue to fund housing inspection to prevent the problem. There are no villains here, only victims, and the victims are children. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jim Peralta.
Jim.
Hi, my name is Jim Peralta. I'm a resident of Monroe County, a taxpayer. I'm a lead-based paint risk assessor. I'm also a state licensed home inspector, so I get into a lot of homes. That's my business, basically. I'm a parent. I'm a grandfather. In a perfect world, my profession wouldn't exist. I would love nothing better than to not have a lead-based paint risk assessor. We shouldn't need them, but we do need them. And in a perfect world, there would not be code enforcement either. You wouldn't need code enforcement. Everybody would just fix what they're supposed to fix. Sad part is they don't. You got to watch them. Everybody's watching everybody. We have policemen because we have crimes. We have firefighters because we have fires. We have lead-poisoned children in this county. I've been to all parts of the county by private individuals, people that are remodeling their houses, people in Brighton, Pittsford, Spencerport, you name it. They all got it. Some people are more conscious of it. Sad part is, in the city, there are a lot of rental properties in the city, and rental properties don't get maintained typically like people would maintain their own house. That's just fact. I've seen it. The other thing I want to mention is that almost half of the children in New York State that are lead poisoned live in 36 specific zip codes. 6 of those zip codes are here in Monroe County. So we do have an issue here with lead poisoning, and I don't think it should be cut from the budget. It actually only, by my calculation, it's about 1/4% of the budget. That's a pretty small price to pay, and it's prevention. The Department of Health County goes out on elevated blood level cases of children. That's after they've been poisoned. I'm typically out there before they're poisoned, and these inspections are typically there to prevent the lead poisoning. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Marvin Mitch.
Good evening. My name is Marvin Mish. I represent the Catholic Diocese of Rochester and the Greater Rochester Community of Churches. As a leader in the faith community, I want to thank you all for your service to our community as members of the legislature. This is an honorable work. The Jewish, Christian, and Muslim traditions teach us that your work in the legislature is to promote the common good of all of our citizens, with special attention to the needs of the poor and vulnerable. Our faith traditions also remind us that our decisions as citizens and elected officials should be guided more by moral convictions than by our attachment to a political party or an interest group. I hope these insights guide all of our deliberations. The Children's Agenda recently issued a report entitled A Decade of Decline. Maybe some of you have seen it. I think Dr. Jeff Kazarowski will talk about it a little bit as well. In this report over the last decade, the Children's Agenda looked at 21 indicators of the health of our children. And it created a graph that shows where there's been improvement and when there's been slippage. The red colors are the way we've slipped back in health for our children. Of the 21 areas studied, 12 were red, 6 are orange, which means kind of neutral, and 3 were green, which is positive. One of the positive areas in our community in the last decade is lead prevention. The proportion of children under 6 with elevated lead levels in their blood has dropped in 2008 from 3.8% in the year 2008 to 1.5, about a half 50% cut. And funding from Monroe County was an important part of this success story. Let's build on those outcomes. I invite you to review your moral convictions as you review the budget for Monroe County for 2012. I hope that one of your convictions is protecting the health of our children. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Stephen Alcorn.
Good evening. I'm a landlord here in the city of Rochester, and I'm heavily involved in my church too. I've been a resident in Monroe County since the mid-'80s, housing provider for about 10 years. I bought every one of my 65 units with seller financing from owners who no longer wanted to do business here in Monroe County. If I knew then what I know now, I might have made the same decision. However, I have chosen to remain and through one tenant at a time and one property at a time try to make Rochester a better place to live. I applaud the success of the program that I read has reduced lead poisoning cases from over 6,000 to less than 300. That's good news and should be celebrated. The bad news is that it was accomplished by targeting the wrong people, and that's landlords. Landlords are just starting to get some breathing room in the last 14 months since quality housing inspections went away. There were a lot of speculation that standards would drop through the floor when that happened, and it has not. Business has improved as we no longer have to wait for a long time to get inspections. In fact, the housing standards here in Rochester are the best they've ever been. There is much speculation now that without funding, there's no vehicle to do lead wipes. In the past 20 months, I've prepared for and passed around 20 C of O inspections. In order to pass, I had to have a valid lead wipe clearance on record for every single one. There is access, but are the lead wipes necessary? And with a 95% clearance rate before the program started, was it even necessary in the first place? The real target here should be educating tenants on how to take pride in caring for themselves and their families, keeping a clean house, and being watchful over their children. Landlords are doing what we were supposed to do, provide clean, safe housing to tenants. Help us continue to do this without unnecessary interference. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mochi Hung.
Hello, my name is Mochi. I'm a Monroe County resident and also a housing provider. When I heard about continuing funding to do more lead paint hazards abatement and inspection, I believe that is a waste of our taxpayer money. It did not identify the root cause of the problem. It does not teach anyone to take care of their place and to be responsible for their own action. I am a small housing provider. I have owned many properties in the city of Rochester, but I have sold majority of mine in the last 5-10 years because of this over-regulation. I only have 2 more properties left, and they're in the better area, so I don't have to deal with social service. But whatever policy that's being passed, I will still need to comply, which is CFO, every other year. And what I do not believe is the lead wipe test. Today, with the lead test, they have to do the lead wipe test regardless if the house has any peeling paint or not, which I think is an overburden. And when people go into a lot of the rental places, they will see a lot of the new tenants, and I'm talking about adult, do not know how to take care of their own place. They're living like a pig pen. I think we need to redirect our direction to teach them how to clean their own house. That is the #1 issue right here. I believe you will see greater return of money if we would donate this $224K to either the Rochester Housing, the Housing Council, or the New York Coalition to teach tenants how to do basic cleaning. I think this will give us more return on our money. And in this fiscal hard time, City Council needs to evaluate and pick the best option with our taxpayers' money, which has the best return for our money, for us, instead of funding the same interest group, which wastes the taxpayers' money with little to show at the end of the year. Thanks.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ginny Denninger.
Hi, I'm Ginny Denninger. I'm a broker of real estate here in Rochester, New York. I wanted to let you know there are other effects. In real estate, in the last 5 years, we have seen a huge drop in business as far as sales go with 2 to 4 family units. They declined about 50% in sales between 2005 and 2011. The negative statistical difference being that the sales median values decreased between 2005 and 2011 for the multifamily homes by $16,300 as an average. Single-family homes actually increased. The decline becomes drastic for the multifamilies after 2007 when full implications of inspections and issues inherent became clear. A peak in sales occurred right before the law passed, with a severe drop-off between 2007 and 2008 when investors chose to do business in other cities. The results are becoming very clear. Rental units have lost significant value in this city. There are many effective ways to prevent lead hazards to children. These do need to be explored. Lead is absorbed from many environmental factors. And you need to think about this. Most of us in this room grew up in homes with lead-based paint. I know I did because I was born before 1978. The other thing is, if it is a moral imperative that we continue this funding, I also suggest then that we inspect all single-family homes and multifamily. There are many single-family homes that are owner-occupied or rentals. Doesn't matter. There are windows, doors, ceilings, whatever, with paint. The inspector just told us that. I see it myself. So let's start inspecting every home. That means everybody in this room who lives in the city of Rochester should also be subjected to this. That includes me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is David All.
That's fine, thank you.
Good evening. My name is David All. I'm here for speaking on behalf of the New York State Coalition of Property Owners and Businesses. You've heard a lot of appeals to your emotions this evening. I'm an engineer. I just want to talk about the science behind these inspections. When we talk about lead inspections, we're talking about dust wipes. Basically, the inspector goes out, marks off a 1 square foot area, takes a wipe out of a closed container, wipes that area, and sends that wipe off for laboratory analysis. If it comes back and that analysis shows a concentration of greater than 40 micrograms, that's 40 millionths of a gram of lead, the test is considered to be a failure. The function and protocol for these dust wipes is delineated in Volume 40 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 745.227, Paragraph E. That section relates to abatement activities. It states that after abatement activities, be it replacing windows, scraping and painting, anything that tends to generate dust, part of your job as a contractor is to clean up after yourself. The way you demonstrate that you've cleaned up is to pass one of these dust wipes. It is an entirely sensible thing to require that after abatement activities. It is not so sensible to require such tests in occupied dwelling units. The purpose of these tests is not, and has never been, to detect the presence or absence of lead paint in a building. Their purpose is to ensure the cleanliness of a work area following abatement activities. A building that is full of lead paint will pass one of these dust wipe tests as long as it's been cleaned recently. A building that has no lead paint at all will likely fail one of these tests if it has not been cleaned recently due to simply the settling of environmental dust from other sources. Attached to the letter I've left with the chair is a scientific study out of New York City that demonstrates exactly that fact. The City of Rochester has determined that the best way to protect children from lead poisoning is to require landlords to clean their tenants' homes once every 6 years, even if no children live there. That's something they're free to do. As Judge Smith of New York's Court of Appeals wrote just last Monday, legislators in our Republican system of government are free to commit folly if they choose. We respectfully submit that this legislative body is free to do smart things if you choose, and refusing to continue to spend the hard-earned money of Monroe County taxpayers to fund these manifestly ineffective inspections is the smart thing to do. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Yolanda Perry.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yolanda Perry, and I am the mother of 8 children, all which have been lead poisoned. We have been in a number of housing with lead poisoning. As far as cleaning in different atmospheres, different ways, there's been a lot of things. Every landlord who has me has loved me and my children on the cleaning aspect. And I find that if testing is taken away, it's going to devastate the community. Our community is already having a lot of issues, and to take testing away would be terrible. It's landlords who want it taken away, who can sleep at night cautiously, not knowing there's innocent children. These children haven't done nothing to anyone, and they deserve a right. They deserve a future as anybody else. These are your future police officers, firefighters, doctors. And yes, previously people did live in lead homes growing up, and also that's why we had Alzheimer's and osteoporosis. Let's prevent in the future. It doesn't hurt to take a couple dollars to make it preventable. Give everybody's children a chance. These could be your grandchildren. These could be your neighbors. These could be innocent people. Everybody has someone who loves each other. Give them a chance, please.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dr. Jeff Kazarowski.
Hi, I'm Jeff Kazarowski. I'm the Executive Director of the Children's Agenda. We're finishing our analysis and recommendations for the 10th consecutive year on the Monroe County proposed budget. And as we complete our careful and objective work, there are three important areas I want to provide information on today. It is really hard to come to the truth sometimes, and it is important to come to the truth and without conflict of interest. And I want to assure you that the three things that we'll speak about this evening are without that conflict of interest and are objective and truthful. First area that I want to mention is group and institutional care for troubled youth in Monroe County. This is really an important area and an area that many communities have struggled to improve, and I have to commend our Department of Human Services and our administration for decreasing the number of kids in group and institutional care. The number has decreased by about 30% over the course of the last few years. 70 fewer kids in that kind of care, and the reason why that's so important is that that care is expensive and it doesn't help kids. It doesn't help our community. It's a very important success and one that we want to pay attention to and commend the county on, and also make sure that we continue to monitor and see the positive trend on. The second area that we want to talk about is homeless youth. So it turns out that homeless youth, services for homeless youth are funded in two ways through the Department of Human Services. One is through the Division of Financial Assistance, and the other is through the Rochester-Monroe County Youth Bureau. And Youth Bureau funding has decreased by about 50% for homeless youth over the course of the last 2 years. To be clear, this is because of state reductions in funding. Okay, state reductions in funding through a funding stream for runaway and homeless youth have been decreased. But that's going to impact kids here. The estimate in the proposed budget is that about 800 homeless youth will not receive services. About 800 kids. And so we think that meeting the basic safety needs of homeless kids should not be subject to fluctuations in government budgets. We're very concerned about these cuts. We have advocated to the state. We want to continue to advocate to the state with Monroe County and the community and others in communities in New York State to restore funding for these services. But in the meantime, we really think that we want to ask the county to please put additional dollars toward homeless youth. We think it's really important for their safety, for all of our safety. The reduction in funding from the state seems to me to be achievable. It's about $116,000. The last area I want to talk about today is, and again, we will have our full recommendations and analysis available for the county legislators and administration in the next 2 days, is services to prevent child abuse, infant mortality, and promote health and development for young children. You've heard me talk about this before. Really important success story for the community is that the county has preserved funding for evidence-based home visitation programs in this county budget, specifically for the Nurse Family Partnership and the Building Healthy Children programs. That's really an important success in troubled financial times. The thing that we'd like to ask, and we would commit to helping with, is that we'd really like to ask the county in the next year to commit to a policy to take these evidence-based home visitation programs to capacity by 2015. There are funding streams that are available that could help with that right now. Medicaid redesign on a New York State level, federal funding through the Center for Medicaid Innovation. We want to work together with the county leadership, with the county legislature, to really take these programs to full scale, because we would see continued decreases in infant mortality. We would see healthier kids. We would see the potential of prevention of more child abuse. Look forward to sharing more with you on the 8th as we complete our analysis, and again, we will get our recommendations and analysis to you all in the next couple of days.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Amy Waltauer.
Hello, folks. My name is Amy Welltower. I'm a property manager in the city of Rochester. I live in the city of Rochester, and I'm heavily involved in a church that's in the city of Rochester. Lead poisoning is horrible, but the numbers are going down. A lot of things are working. These kids that are testing positive, are they U.S. born? Did they have lead when they came into the country? Are they also being tested for other things, other nutrients, such as calcium, enough iron in their diets to help them in getting rid of the extra lead? If we're testing the homes, why aren't we testing the schools, the playgrounds, the water pipes that bring in our water? Any public service buildings, school sports equipment supplied through the schools. Are they being tested for any lead? Because that's where they can also come from too. With the inspections happening every 2 years, what's going to happen is local investors are going to get tired of it. So they're going to sell their properties to out of town, out of state, and out of country investors. These investors are not going to know any property management companies that are good enough. So they're going to hire somebody that seems decent to them. The property managers are unfortunately probably going to run it into the ground. And then we're going to have more abandoned properties in the city of Rochester with even more lead than we were trying to avoid. How can we avoid this? We can help people in cleaning. That's one thing. Nutrients. Obviously, the numbers are going down. Let's keep doing it. Tighten restrictions is going to have investors fleeing. And if $224,000 is the drop in the bucket for these testings, I would employ the committees that think that it's a drop in the bucket to reach in your back pockets and pay it yourself, or raise the money to do so. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Our last speaker is Tom Gregory.
This is a unique committee meeting because most of the people, or many of the people here are assembled, are professionals. And one thing that I should point out to you, there's actually a definition for a professional that can actually turn into a funding source that's not subject to budgetary restrictions. Professional, by definition, is required, it's mandatory to be a professional. That 15% of your time is given. If you were a Hebrew, you'd hear that you know the word tzedakah. Tzedakah in the Jewish language, in the Hebrew language, translates to the word loving kindness. And if anybody who knows halakhic law, you'll know that loving kindness has a minimum, about 15%, but has no limit. Can you imagine how much money would be available in kind service if a coordinated effort was made amongst professionals in this county who are basically associated with their awards or their programs and gave 15% that by definition of a professional, for I'm an organizational sociologist, I give all my time pro bono. Bottom line is we gave back to the very same people who were charged to serve. And we wouldn't have to go over here to the county and ask them for money. At least that portion of our time that we decided to give tzedakah, loving kindness. And that's a funding source that this county's history is proven on. From 1812 all the way through, self-reliance, individuals working together with the skills and talents that they have, yes, certainly getting assistance from the county, but giving their time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. At this time, I would like to invite Scott Adair, Monroe County Chief Financial Officer, to present the proposed 2012 Monroe County operating budget as it pertains to the Human Services Committee. Mr. Adair.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to present the Human and Health Services area of the County Executive's proposed 2012 budget this evening. This evening we'll run through some slides that will talk about the overall Human and Health Services area as it pertains to the proposed 2012 budget and how it affects the operations of the county. Human and Health Services area covers both the operating and grants budgets. Combined, these segments are the largest portion of the county appropriations. The overall county budget, proposed 2012 county budget, is balanced. It maintains our property tax rate at $8.99. It complies with the county's Taxpayer Protection Act, which was established by this body in 2007, and will comply with the new New York State property tax cap that was implemented this past year. Overall, the Health and Human Services area of the budget is contained in all four categories of our budget: mandated, non-mandated, debt service, and non-mandated user fee supported. Human and Health Services, the functional area, it encompasses about 23.4% of our budget. It's social services, it's the aging department, it's youth and veterans. Health services includes mental health, public health, and Monroe Community Hospital, and is approximately 15.2% of our operating budget. Where does the money come from to pay for these services? It comes from a variety of sources. Those sources include property taxes, state aid, federal aid, other receipts, charges for services, and ultimately the hospital provides itself $68 million of funding through its services that it provides to its clients. The grants budget, which is something that this body authorized as part of the implementation of our new ERP system in 2006, the grants budget is approximately $172 million, of which 88.9% of that budget is included in the Health and Human Services area. As you can see by this slide, 68.7% of the grants budget is allocated to human services and 20.3% is allocated to health services. One of the other items to point out about the 2012 budget is, again, it is consistent with the 2011 budget, where the mandated portion of our budget is 82%, our non-mandated portion of the budget is 18%. Overall, the Department of Human Services has approximately $374.4 million in appropriations, $283.5 million worth of revenues from other sources, and is ultimately supported by the taxpayers by $90.9 million in 2012. Broken down into some of the specific areas for the budget and human services, the Family Assistance Program of approximately $56.2 million, the Safety Net Program approximately $60.2 million. You'll notice some changes in these two programs this past year. As many of you probably who follow state finances has noted that they've changed a number of the way that they allocate dollars to us, and the Family Assistance Program through a federal program now is fully funded, while the Safety Net Assistance Program, the funding has been reduced from a 50-50 split with the state to a 71% county portion and a 29% state portion. The area of daycare. Daycare, approximately the total appropriations are equivalent from last year to this year at approximately $45 million. You'll notice two different pieces here. There's a facilitated enrollment grant, which is completely state-sponsored, and the daycare portion, which is sponsored by both the state and the county. The number of children anticipated to be served by this program by daycare is approximately 7,666 in 2012. Adolescent care and child welfare. Adolescent care is seeing a reduction of the number of cases, and it ultimately equates to a $2 million reduction in the appropriations for that particular program. And as pointed out by one of the speakers earlier this evening, in the child welfare area, we continue to experience decreases in the caseload size. The projected number of children in foster care next year is approximately 737, which is 17 down from the prior year. Because of the shifts in available funding for these programs, we are experiencing reduced county costs. You'll notice that the net county support for these two programs is down approximately $7 million. This is one of the fascinations of the state budget process, where they change funding streams on us. We provided funding to the Family Assistance Program and ultimately to the Adolescent Care Program. And funded those and reduced the net county support for those. In addition to that, we picked up our portion, the 71% of the safety net program. The purchase of services program, you'll notice that this is down approximately $6 million. This is really two things that have been reduced in this 2012 budget. The nurse-family partnership and the perinatal home visiting program have been moved to the health department, approximately $1.4 million, and the Hillside Work Scholarship and Encompass programs were reduced by approximately $5.3 million in 2012. Can we hold questions till the end, please? Certainly. I'll do my best. Ultimately, let me see if I can move back and try to do too much. We reduced the appropriations in the purchase of services area by approximately $6 million. 1.4 of that was moved over to the health department, which was both the nurse family partnership program and the perinatal home visiting program. And then we reduced funding by $5.3 million for the Hillside Work Scholarship program and the Encompass program. You're welcome. Another department inside of the Human Services area is the Office for the Aging. Again, these appropriations were reduced as part of the state budget, approximately $300,000. County spending for this particular program remains flat from the prior year. The Youth Bureau was also identified as a program that was impacted by significant state aid cuts this year. Those state aid cuts have been passed along to the folks that we partner with in this program, and that is resulting in a $600,000 reduction in overall expenses in this program and a $600,000 reduction in the revenues for this program. The net county support for this program continues at approximately $500,000 each year, and that's flat between 2011 and 2012. In the Office of Mental Health, these appropriations again are approximately flat, down about $600,000 from the prior year. And that is effectively the elimination of a number of agency contracts because of state aid cuts during the year. Again, the county portion funding of this particular program is flat at $3.2 million in both 2011 and 2012. Moving into the next area in the public health arena, the appropriations are down here. This is a common topic that we talk about as to the reasoning for those appropriations being down approximately $4 million. Those will be grants that have not been recognized at this point and will come before this body throughout the upcoming fiscal year in 2012. We would anticipate that these dollars will be relatively, from an appropriations side, will be relatively static at the end of next year. To highlight a couple of the programs that we'll talk more about, I'm sure, as we get into questions, and a couple more slides here. The Special Children's Services Program is approximately $46.5 million. That's down from $49 million in the prior year. That reduction is based on a state reimbursement reduction done at the state level. In addition to that, all the other programs are relatively flat. I believe they're all within $100,000 of what their gross appropriations were in the prior year. As I just mentioned, the Public Health Special Children's Services Program, you'll notice a $2 million drop in the appropriations here, about $1.5 million in revenue dropping. Again, the premise behind this program is the state reduced its rates for reimbursement here to the providers, which ultimately lowered the county's cost for administering and providing the services associated with this program. The last area of the Health and Human Services slides for this evening is Monroe Community Hospital. Appropriations are up approximately $2 million, $2.6 million from last year. Primary driver of this is something that we haven't really talked a lot about, but it is one of the items that continues to drive significant costs into our budget, and that is this required cost for state retirement system. That is probably the largest increasing expenditure for the hospital at this point in time in 2012. In addition to that, the county will provide an additional $500,000 worth of support for the operations of the hospital in 2012. And with that, it concludes my presentation, and I'm more than willing to take questions. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you, Mr. Adair, and also Commissioner Reed and all her department heads for all the work that went into this budget. Thank you very much. At this time, Mr. Adair did say he would take questions, so as long as they pertain specifically to the Human Services budget, we'd like to entertain some questions from the committee. Legislator Daniele.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Scott for a thorough and well thought out presentation. I do have a question regarding the lead paint discussion that's been had tonight by our audience. Obviously, we all have concerns about lead paint and child safety in our community. My question through you to the administration is, how much are we planning on spending in 2012 for lead poisoning abatement, monitoring, and education of lead poisoning in our community?
Through the chair, I'll take the first stab at this, and then I'll turn it over to the program people that can probably talk in more detail if that's necessary. But in this 2012 budget, as it sits before you today, we have approximately $200,000 in the Department of Human Services to provide for services regarding that, and $2.2 million in the Department of Health for effectively lead paint abatement and services surrounding that. It's a continuation of existing programs that have been the partnership that has been referred to this evening between the city and county throughout the last 7 or 8 years regarding this subject matter.
Thank you, and again, through you, Madam Chairman. I would assume that the department has done a thorough analysis of what programs work best to get the results that we're looking for, and what programs perhaps are not as effective, and that's how we've come to this conclusion. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. I do believe there is a variation on the explanation that's been received, and I would turn this over to Commissioner Reed to talk a little bit about the analysis that her department went through in determining the reduction in funding and the amount of time that they've spent with the city and the city's program itself to try and work through these issues over the last 18 months regarding this reduced funding. So I will let Kelly speak at this point.
Through you, Madam Chair. I feel concerned that there's been a tremendous amount of misinformation that's been swirling around with regard to the proposed elimination of funding to this city's Inspection Compliance Service Unit. So I'm going to give you a fairly detailed explanation so that you understand a bit about where we stand with regard, where the Department of Human Services stands with regard to the recommendation to end the funding for this program in June of 2012. A sample letter was recently disseminated by lead advocates in the community that included this statement: if the county does not want to continue the program by which they successfully identified units with lead hazards, they must work with the City of Rochester partners to come up with a new solution. What I would suggest to you is that we are coming up with new solutions. We always have been at the table. We're at the table now, and we'll continue to be at the table, addressing the issue of lead and the concerns that everybody in this community has with regard to lead poisoning of children in our community. We actually ended the program that we had with the City of Rochester in June of 2010. I want to be clear with you that the funding that the Department of Human Services provided to the city was never targeted to be a lead abatement program. It was never intended to be a lead abatement program. What it was a quality home inspection program, what we commonly call a QHI program. It was developed as a multi-pronged safety initiative with the goal of reducing transiency among public assistance recipients. We theorized that if we were able to have a quality home inspection provided, that our clients would move less, ultimately saving taxpayer dollars by reducing the number of times they moved and improving the overall well-being of public assistance clients because their children would not move from school to school, etc. Safety was a primary concern, and in that particular multi-pronged approach, lead was one of the concerns we addressed. This made sense because the vast majority of the rental properties were in the city of Rochester, and the city council adopted a lead abatement mandate for the city of Rochester. So it seemed to make sense that our QHI program would be used in this particular, to lay over the city's own mandate. They used the QHI mandate that we had, the safety mandate, to allow the authority to get into the homes. 2 years into that process, the Center for Governmental Research conducted a study of lead paint hazards. That was in 2008, and in their findings, they concluded that the QHI program was the least effective program available for identifying lead paint hazards. It was the least effective of all of the programs that was available. Makes a lot of sense to me. It was never intended to be a lead abatement program. It was one of the things that we were looking for. Of what their findings specifically said was only 2% of the QHI inspections found a hazard versus 18% of the city's C of O inspections and 27% of the inspections that were done as a result of a resident, actually a tenant, actually filing a complaint. Then in 2010, the New York State Comptroller audited the city's lead inspection work and determined that both the city's C of O inspections and the lead inspections that were done as a part of the QHI process performed poorly. So now we have two independent reports that are suggesting to us that a $400,000 investment being made by the Department of Human Services is not effective. We also know that the QHI process was not achieving our primary goal, which was not lead abatement. It was transiency among our clients. We also know, 2 years into this, that we have not been successful in reducing transiency among our clients. In addition, landlords had commented to us that they felt concerned that it was causing a delay in their ability to place people into their homes, into the places that they had available for public assistance tenants. We confirmed that what the landlords were telling us was actually true by looking at the contract objectives that we had with the City of Rochester for that $400,000 investment, and they were not achieving the objectives that they agreed to in their contracts with us. With all of that in mind, two independent reports not involving us, no reduction in transiency, and the evidence that they were not achieving the contracted objectives that they agreed to as the City of Rochester, we ended the QHI program. I feel like that decision was made with very solid evidence and compelling reasons for ending that program. That said, that was June of 2010, and we said to the City of Rochester in June of 2010, we are ending the QHI program, but in the spirit of cooperation and commitment and concern for the young people that you have heard a lot about in the comments that were made this evening. We will give you a full year's funding to do two things: to identify alternative funding sources for the City of Rochester's mandate for lead abatement, and also to improve your C of O process. They did not identify alternative funding. They came back and asked us again. We continued that funding for another 12 months. 6 months of that is in the year 2011. 6 months of it is in the year 2012. Staff of the Department of Human Services have been at the table regularly talking about the fact that we are not able to continue to invest $400,000 of local taxpayer dollars. There is no New York State money in this $400,000 investment. We cannot continue to fund this with local taxpayer dollars when we have profound evidence it is not successful. Nonetheless, we should be celebrating the success of the program itself, and we should be looking at ways to be addressing the needs of the young people who are still exposed to lead hazards in this community. You just saw a family stand up here that were exposed to lead hazards. They are a concern to me, and they should be a concern to everybody sitting in this room. But we should be investing in successful programs for the abatement of lead, not in unsuccessful programs. I think we need to celebrate the success that we've had, and I think we need to acknowledge that we've been so successful in reducing the amount of lead in the community that we need to have very strategic investments and very strategic methods for identifying where the lead exists in our community. And so we've been sitting at the table with the City of Rochester, and we've offered them opportunities to data share with micro-targeted information. For instance, we have offered the City of Rochester the information on homes where we know there was a lead concern identified and where children are now being cared for in in-home daycare that is subsidized by us. We offered to share that information with them and to use the authority of the Department of Human Services as a subsidized daycare provider to go into those homes to target and determine whether that lead had in fact been abated. They have refused that offer to date. I'm hoping they're not going to continue to do that. We have also offered, tonight one of the speakers specifically said that there are 6 zip codes that are identified in this community where there is a high risk of lead. We have also offered to specifically provide information that we have on residents with small children in those homes so that they can go in and micro-target. We are not walking away from this issue. We are simply saying that we cannot afford to spend $400,000 on a program that an independent auditor indicated was the least effective measure in this community. That's why we made the decision to cut the funding.
Thank you, Director Reed, for your thorough response on this and your obvious thoughtful contemplation on this important issue and other issues in your budget. So thank you.
Any other questions for Scott Adair? On this, Legislator Cayley?
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for your response, Ms. Reed. Living within a city neighborhood that has an increased level of lead in its homes, this is a very important issue to me. And where $224,000 may not seem like a lot to some, and that we might be able to pull it out of our pocket, it's not. It is a big thing. I would like specifically to ask Mr. Adair, through the chair, where does this appear in the budget, the cut of the funding, or was this, please, budget line?
Through the chair, thanks for giving me the opportunity to have other people help me find where it was in the budget book. It is actually included in the appropriation for family assistance under the appropriations for family assistance. So effectively, it's a public benefit grant included in that $55.6 million or $55.7 million is where that would be found.
Thank you. And I do have a couple more questions I would like to ask, if I may. Through the chair, one of the speakers brought up the particular issue of testing with the refugee population that's been entering the city and the county. And through the chair, I would like to know, well, I'd like to make a statement and ask that going forward that this be considered. I think at this point we have an enormous opportunity to create a baseline of testing results of children as they're coming in to the Rochester area, county area, with regards to lead levels. Many refugees come from camps. Camps are not houses, camps don't have paint, but camps could have other issues that exist in the area. And I know that I did speak briefly on this before when we were accepting a grant for education. I am concerned, this is kind of two-pronged. I think that we have the opportunity and that Human Services can utilize this as a baseline. If funding is cut, if $222 is taken, that's a reduction. The city will most likely continue their lead wipe practices, but fewer homes will be inspected. To expect that the levels of lead in poisoned children is going to stay static and not rise is one that I'm not willing to accept that premise. And so let me back up here. What are some of the ways that we can address going forward without funding this in this budget, the remediation of lead poisoning in children? Sorry. So I guess I would be asking that through you to Ms. Reed or to Dr. Doninger. That's the question.
That's your question? Is that really, could we stick to the questions that pertain?
It's the question of this year's budget and going forward. We are taking funding from one program, duly noted that it was warned that it would happen. Where are we picking up that slack? Because I do believe that some of the remediation or some of the testing has led to lower levels of lead poisoning within the children. So where are we picking up the slack that we're not funding through the city in trying to keep those levels low?
Through the chair, I'm probably the wrong person to answer this, but I'm going to take a shot at it. The one thing I would point out to you is that the effective programs regarding lead abatement are primarily housed in our Department of Health and not necessarily the Department of Human Services. As the Commissioner stated earlier, the program when it was initially thought of, or the $400,000 was provided to the city, was not for lead abatement. And ultimately the State Controller's report that was issued in 2010 kind of highlights the fact that the QHI program is the problem, and it is ineffective from a lead control point. But the other programs included in their audit, which were Department of Health programs, not Human Services programs, were extremely effective, and the partnership that the city and county had formed regarding lead abatement and the programs that the health department is involved with are extremely successful, and I believe there was even some national recognition for this joint partnership regarding this, and those programs will continue at the same level of funding that they have in the past. The program that we're speaking about and that's been talked about tonight is a QHI program, which, as Commissioner Reed stated, was never intended to be for the purpose that the city has effectively tried to use it for. And since we have reduced funding or eliminated funding at this point in time, that becomes their responsibility to determine how to deal with that portion of the program. Our responsibility is on the public health side of it, and we will continue forward with that funding.
Thank you. Then, through the chair. No, that's not what I want to ask. Sorry. I'd like to back up and ask a different question. And this is to child placement in foster homes and families that receive TANF funding. When we as the county place children in homes for foster care or for any emergency services, are those properties inspected?
Through the chair, I like when I go through battery sets, so I appreciate this. I think that there's a little bit of misunderstanding here in the fact that we don't perform the inspections, the city does, so we wouldn't be able to
effectively answer that question right now, to know which houses the city has actually performed the tests on prior to people going into them. That would be a question for the city administration at this point in time.
Thank you, but that's not exactly what I'm asking. I think in moving forward, the question really is when we handle the funding for families and we're responsible for placing children in the homes, do we have a function or a mechanism that allows us to know that whatever city houses or suburban houses that these children might be placed in have been inspected for lead and are safe, or safe at the time that they're inspected for lead?
Through the chair, the county does not perform that as a procedure. It is something that effectively, through this certificate of occupancy in the QHI program, that we found to be ineffective at this point in time, was provided to the city to perform those inspections. But we do not have a workforce that goes out and performs these inspections prior to putting people in those homes.
Thank you, understood. But would we have a process going forward that would place the children that we care for in a home that's been inspected at the time of placement? And could that be achieved through this budget, even with a reduction of funding through the city?
Through the chair, I would effectively say that potentially could be, and is something that the department can review and take under consideration, but it is not specifically contemplated in this budget that we would perform that particular procedure for those homes.
Thank you. I appreciate the answer, and I guess I would strongly say that when we are caring for children and placing them in homes, that whether the city performs the function for us or we perform the function for us, that it's important that we place, and some of the times these children are young and infants, that they be placed in homes that are safe. It really did resonate, the issue with the daycare. So that is a recommendation. And that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Legislator Andrews.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say thank you to Mr. Adair for the presentation this evening, as well as for administration representatives, Commissioner Reed, Dr. Doniger, for being here this evening to answer some questions. Just continuing the conversation briefly about the lead program, did I understand through the chair correctly, Commissioner Reed, that the county's contribution, mostly via its Department of Health, is about $2.2 million for next year to lead abatement? Is that accurate?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that is correct. There are 4 separate programs that we operate that are grant funded, and I believe that the total is about 2.2 or 2.4 million dollars. These grants have been before this committee several times, and sometimes it's a little confusing that they sort of sound like they have the same titles, but in fact there's 4 different programs, and they're well coordinated and have different approaches and targets, but that is a major effort in our department.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, you mentioned there are 4 grants. Is any of that contribution, that $2.2 million, from county funds itself, or is it all grant funds?
There is a very small portion from county funds, but the vast majority of it is state and federal grants.
Thank you. Do you have an estimate of what that portion is that's county funded, through the chair?
Through the chair, we can get that to you.
Thank you. So if the county were interested for the 2012 budget in increasing its or in sort of continuing to sustain a higher contribution, then it could add via the Department of Health an additional contribution to the city. I mean, I understand what you're saying about you're no longer going to fund or stop funding the QHI program, and the effect of that, I guess, is from the city perspective that will decrease its ability to get into houses to do inspections, that it was to do lead inspections that it was using that program to be able to do. So if its funding will be reduced by $225,000 next year, or would have been $440,000 or $450,000 for the full year, if you were interested in continuing to make a contribution so that additional inspections could be done, you could just increase the county's contribution by $400,000 or so, because you already have some sort of contribution going to lead abatement. Is that true?
Through the chair, I think that it's two answers I'm going to provide. As you well know, any legislator can make an amendment during the budget process to the budget. We do not have an appropriation to fund any additional dollars through to the city. In addition to that, it is my understanding that the contract with the city also expires as of June 30th of this year. So there's no contracting mechanism to do that either at this point in time.
Through the chair, but there already is some sort of small contribution the county is making to lead abatement programs from county funds. So those funds could be increased, assuming that there were interest in this body in doing so.
Through the chair, that would be a decision of the legislative body to attempt to do that.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair, then, I guess my question is, are you at all concerned, and given the fact that earlier in this year there was information about how this is the first year in almost a decade we've seen an uptick in the number of children that have been identified as being poisoned by lead, are you concerned at the timing of this, even though it wasn't your intended purpose for the funding to the city, but that is what they were using it for, are you concerned with the timing of the cut in funding and the fact that we've seen an increase in the number of kids that have been poisoned by lead, that's all coinciding right now? And in fact, I know that you said that the increase in number of children who were poisoned was just was statistically insignificant at that time, but perhaps it's the beginning of an upward trend. Is that a concern that you have, and if so, how would we address it? Through the chair.
Through you, Madam Chair, we have seen a steep decline in the number of lead-poisoned children in this community, both at the high level of lead poisoning and at the lower level of lead poisoning, 10 micrograms per deciliter and 20 micrograms per deciliter, when following both of those statistics for the last decade. We knew that when the numbers got down under 100 or in that range, that we would start to see a reduction in the rate of decline. It just couldn't continue to decline at this steep pace forever. What we assume is that the decline is going to sort of level out over time, and it will be very, very difficult to totally eliminate all cases of lead poisoning. I would assume that 10 years from now we'll still be seeing a handful of cases that we will be struggling with. The other thing is, as we get down to lower numbers, we're going to see them bounce around a little bit, and hopefully we will continue to see a downward trend if we, say, average 3 to 5 years together. Hopefully we'll continue to see a downward trend for the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you. I certainly hope that's accurate and true, and if not, I guess we'll have to revisit this, because if the trend does turn around and starts to increase, then obviously something's going awry, because we have made such great progress as a community. So thank you for that information. A couple of questions, general budget questions, before I get into some specific program questions. Regarding the Taxpayer Protection Act that we usually spend a tremendous amount of time discussing in this body, can I just ask generally if there were any items that last year were considered, for example, non-mandated, that this year are considered mandated, or vice versa, or any shifts or recasting that occurred from, I don't know, all the 4 different areas that we have in our budget? Through the chair.
Through the chair, no.
Thank you. So then everything is categorized the exact same way in 2012 as it was for 2011 to 2010.
Through the chair, at the end of that, you stuck in 2010. I'm not sure I can answer that statement, but 2011 to 2012, the answer would be yes, it's the same.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, in your presentation, you also spoke about the budget being in compliance with a tax cap. I guess I'm not exactly sure how to ask this, but how much of the tax cap did we use up, and how much would be available?
Through the chair, during an earlier presentation, I talked about this. We haven't actually finalized the tax cap numbers at this point, so I'm unable to respond effectively as we identify all the charges localities, which should be in the next week to week and a half, hopefully with everybody's cooperation from inside of the county office building.
we should have those numbers and be able to provide them at that time. But we are, rest assured, the calculations that we've done in order to make sure that we're compliant, we've used some pretty significant estimates in the areas that we don't have numbers for yet, and we're not concerned about our ability to comply with the tax cap.
Thank you.
Any other questions? You have no other
Oh,
questions?
yeah, I have some further questions. Yeah, I'm just
sorry.
reading. Thank you.
I thought you did something.
Through the chair, last year in December, it was reported that there were 354 full-time vacancies. At this point in time, I would request how many vacancies are remaining as of today. If you know that today, that's great. If not, you can provide it.
Through the chair, we will attempt to get that information to you.
Thank you. Through the chair, could you tell me what the cost of the 2.5% raise is for the M&Ps for 2012?
Through the chair, that's information that we can provide to you. Again, we were more prepared to deal with Human Service Committee issues this evening than we are what I would refer to as Ways and Means or issues.
Thank you. If that can be provided, that's fine. I just have one follow-up if you're going to provide that as well. When you provide that data, could you also indicate through the chair what portion of that raise is for the grant-funded positions? I think in last year the figure was $58,000 worth, so if I can just have that figure for 2012 as well. Thank you.
Legislator Andrews, you'll have another chance on December 8th to ask all these questions as well.
Madam Chair, that was my last question, not directly on Human Services. I appreciate the opportunity. I'll now move on to Human Services question. Through the chair, Project SAVE was an important project that we spent a lot of time discussing in Human Services over the past few years. I know last year the project ended, and I understand that the purpose was that we felt there had been a cultural shift and the goals of the project had been met and would continue on in the department even though in name Project SAVE was gone. At this point, could I just ask the Commissioner to speak to how you feel Project SAVE has lived on in the department even though it's no longer there officially?
Through you, Madam Chair, we did speak last year about the fact that SAVE as a project ended because we achieved the objectives that we had set forth to achieve. However, SAVE as a philosophy continues. With the department, I can give you some examples of areas that we measured as a part of Project SAVE, and we continue to look at. For instance, as of October 31st, we're the only district of the Big Six districts that has been able to reduce the temporary assistance caseload for the period December 2010 through October 31st of 2011. We've reduced our caseload by 4%. The rest of the Big Six, 0.4%, I'm sorry. The rest of the Big Six counties, which are Erie, Onondaga, Nassau, Suffolk, and Westchester, have all reported an increase, some up to 4.6%. We also, in comparing ourselves to the Big Six counties, our increase in the public assistance caseload during the recession was substantially lower than our colleagues. Our increase was overall from the beginning of the recession to October 31st of 2011 was 10.3%, which was outpaced by the other counties by somewhere between 12.3% and 67.4%. Other areas we continue to see a decrease in the number of children in foster care placement, which was an objective that we also had in Project Save. We've reduced the number of young people in secure detention as well. And Dr. Kazarowski in his presentation talked about the substantial reduction in PINS petitions filed as well. So there's a number of the measures that we were looking at continue their trend downward.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Legislator Andrews, can we just have questions that pertain specifically to the 2012 budget? You can ask those other questions after we're done with the regular meeting.
Sure. Thank you.
Just the budget.
Thank you. Through the chair, there had been 118 FTEs usually associated with Project Save in the county's budget. Are those 118 FTEs still included in your department in the 2012 budget?
Through the chair, as we've noted in the past, while the 118 were added when the initial project was kicked off, I'll call it, various positions inside of the Department of Human Services have been eliminated, abolished, or vacant at this point in time. So we don't have an actual number, but I would say that it is probably less than the 118 that was originally anticipated.
Thank you. Through the chair, do you think it's safe to say that the majority of those folks are still employed in the department?
Through the chair, I would say that is probably a safe assumption, yes.
Thank you. Regarding MCH, last year in the budget, there was a reference to a plan to privatize food and laundry service. Through the chair, as you're aware, I've asked about this several times throughout the course of the year. I don't see it included in the 2012 budget. Can you tell me how that stands at this point in time?
Through the chair, as with any internal operation in the county, we reserve the right to make changes throughout the year. At this point in time, we have not done anything in 2011 based on the information that we received as part of an RFP process. We will continue to look at that as an option for MCH, but it is there are appropriations included in the budget for the individuals. Their positions are funded at this point in time.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, could I request that what you receive from the RFP? I'd be interested in reviewing those proposals. Is that public, or can I have copies?
Through the chair, because we never acted on it, I'm not 100% sure if it wouldn't still be considered proprietary information of those vendors, but I can check with the law department and get back to you on that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Also under the MCH budget in 2011 was a projected revenue line of $2.9 million from Medicare Part D. Can you tell me through the chair how much of that $2.9 million was realized in 2011?
Through the chair, the whole 2.9 was recognized.
And so the 2.9 turned into an accurate projection?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you. How much is projected through the chair through 2012 from that revenue source?
Through the chair, after considerate deliberation, it's approximately 2.9 again.
Thank you very much.
Apologize, it was 3.0.
3.0,
yes.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair, what's the occupancy rate at MCH?
Through the chair, approximately 97%.
Thank you. Through the chair, for the fundraising efforts at the Monroe County Pediatrics and Visitation Center, I'm aware of a $1 million gift, a very generous gift that we received. Has there been any additional revenue received for fundraising on that project?
Through the chair, yes, there has been additional revenue besides the $1 million. As you're aware of, there was a brick sale, and currently there is $100 in the trust fund from the brick sales.
Legislator Andrews, questions for this budget, though? 2012 budget. Can we have those?
Through the chair, this is this budget. It's revenue for that. Is that revenue for fundraising budgeted in the 2012 budget, or is that separate? Or does that not need to be in the 2012 budget?
Through the chair, no, that revenue, there is no revenue associated with that in this budget.
Thank you. And was it Jack Cronin that administers that program of the bricks?
I don't know. Can we maybe
Yes, sorry.
move on to, is there any other questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Thank you.
What's the status of the state takeover of Medicaid administration through the chair?
Through the chair, there's really no updates at this point in time. It's continued ongoing discussions.
Thank you. I guess if we could look now at the child welfare, family, adolescent services portion of the budget. In your presentation, one of the slides talked about a decrease in county support from 22 million to about 14 million. Could I just ask for a more thorough explanation of the shifts there? I couldn't follow everything that was explained. Thank you.
Through the chair, I will, as the note comes forward, I will attempt to explain this. As you may recall, during the state budget negotiations and ultimate adoption, there was a shift in the safety net dollars from a 50-50 split to a 79-21% split between, or 71-29%, 71 being the county's share now. In addition to that, what they did was they attempted to provide federal funding to offset our family assistance costs through a block grant, I believe it was. And that ultimately provided additional funding beyond what was needed for family assistance and could be used for the child welfare area, which ultimately reduced what the net county cost was. I actually have the wrong slide. Sorry, I did have the right side. It reduced there's additional federal revenue in the child welfare area now of approximately $7 million that reduced the county support of that program down to approximately $2 million in the 2012 budget. So ultimately there was a block grant provided that provided funding for family assistance, and the leftover funds beyond what we needed for the appropriations and family assistance was provided to child welfare. That was offset by the loss of the 21% reimbursement on the safety net program.
Through the chair then, so if I follow you correctly, it's additional money from block grant funding for family assistance that then we were able to move over to child welfare. Is that correct?
Through the chair, the state moved that over. We did not
Okay.
effectively move it over. The state required us to.
Through the chair, do you expect that to be a permanent shift from the state?
Through the chair, not at this time. No, we believe it's probably a 1 to 2 year shift.
Thank you. Through the chair, one of the issues we've talked about for the past couple of years is the increase in the number of child abuse reports that are filed and investigated. Those numbers appear to continue to go up for 2012. And I guess my question is, in 2010, the number of reports that were indicated were, I think you said it was 24.2%. Do you have that same figure for 2011 now? What percentage of those reports were indicated through the chair?
Through the chair, we can provide that information to you. We don't have it here this evening.
Thank you. And the community really has identified this as an area of concern, and I know it's an area of concern for me as well. And I know that in the past when we've talked about the increasing number of reports that are filed, there's been some discussion about how the number of reports filed may have increased, but the percentage indicated stays relatively the same. However, even if that's still true for this last year's worth of information, it still means there's an increased number of children who are suffering from child abuse or neglect in our community. And so my question really is, what is the plan at this point in time to address this so that we can reverse this trend? Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, there is an increase in the number of child abuse reports that have been received in this community, across the state, and across the nation. It's a national trend that has been happening. No one really knows the reason why that's occurring. And I know that there have been reports, Dr. Kazarowski and the Children's Agenda have recently published a report that suggests that the increase in child abuse reports is an indication of an increase in concern for children in our community. With all due respect for the Children's Agenda and for Dr. Kazarowski, I think that that's a very dangerous assumption. We don't know that that's true. What we know, we don't know that more children in our community are being abused. We know that more reports are being received. If that is an indication of reports of young people that were being abused and that we didn't know about before, then we're doing a great thing as a community to make the reports. We're asking this community in all kinds of different ways to be more responsible for its children. If one of the ways they are demonstrating a higher level of responsibility is by increasing the number of child abuse reports that we receive, I'm happy to accept them. There is absolutely no way of knowing whether more children are being abused or if we just know about more children being abused. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just a little bit I've learned about this. It seems to be, though, that even if the number of reports indicated stays the same or abuse reports are up and the number of children somehow that are being abused isn't up or doesn't correlate to that increase, it still seems that there's data that indicates those are children are not necessarily in great situations and that they need more assistance. And I guess I would say that I didn't really hear how we're going to try to address that. I mean, it may be a national trend or it may be something and we don't know why, but it still seems like it's an area of concern. And I guess I would ask for us to pay more attention to this or come up with some sort of plan in terms of, okay, maybe it's more than just a national trend or something that can be brushed aside as that.
Legislator Andrews, can we just go back to just try to finish the questions for the 2012 budget, and we can ask those questions later?
Madam Chair, sometimes one question leads to a follow-up, and they're all regarding the budget.
I understand that. I was just trying to finish, move it along a little.
Okay. Well, in a similar area then, regarding the purchase of service contracts, could I request the list of 2012 for the $14.6 million for the purchase of service contracts, please? Through the chair.
Through the chair, we can provide that.
Thank you. Through the chair, in your presentation, it was stated, I think, that Hillside Work Scholarship and Encompass will receive a $5.3 million cut. Is that out of this area, the purchase of service contracts?
Through the chair, yes, it is.
What other agencies are receiving cuts through the chair?
Through the chair, you'll be able to delineate that when we provide the list to you. I don't believe there was any other significant cuts to providers, but that's off the top of my head, and I haven't looked at that list in the last couple of days, so that'll be provided with the list.
Thank you. Have these two agencies been notified of their impending cuts?
Through the chair, they've actually been participating with us in long discussions, both at the county level and at the state level regarding this.
Thank you. Have they secured then an alternative funding mechanism to keep themselves whole? Or are they really realizing a true $5.3 million cut for their programs?
Through the chair, that would be more appropriately answered by them.
Would it be possible through the chair to just have someone find out that information and follow up with me, please?
Through the chair, that's a question that should be directed to those agencies by the legislator and not from the administration.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair, when you provide the listing of agencies that are receiving that purchase of service contracts, could you also provide the percentage of that funding that goes to evidence-based programs? I believe it's usually about 20%, but if you could give me that figure for 2012, I would appreciate it.
Through the chair, we can do that.
Thank you. In that same area of the budget, the miscellaneous revenue, which I think are the local donations, is down significantly. Could you explain why, through the chair?
Through the chair, those donations were primarily provided by those two agencies, and thus with the reduction in funding, those donations have also been reduced.
Thank you. Under the write-up regarding preventive services, the 2011 budget listed NFP, or Nurse Family Partnership, and Building Healthy Children as the Department of Human Services' two primary prevention programs. The 2012 budget only lists Building Healthy Children. I was wondering if there's a reason why NFP is not included in that portion, that summary.
Through the chair, as I stated in the presentation, the NFP program has been changed over to the Department of Health.
Thank you. Through the chair, then, what's the funding level for NFP for 2011 and 2012?
Through the chair, it's relatively flat. I believe it's within inside of $100,000.
Thank you. And through the chair, do you know what that figure is? I don't recall exactly what it was for 2011.
Through the chair, if memory serves me correctly, I'm going to use a number of approximately $1.4 million, but I can find that out specifically.
Thank you. Now, over the past year or so, probably more, it seems like there have been increased number of revenue sources for NFP, and we've talked a lot, this committee has, when referrals have come before us about growing this program. So at this point in time, with knowing that there had been some additional revenue sources, how many do you still plan to serve 3 families, or 300 families with Nurse Family Partnership in 2012, or is there an expectation of working with more families?
Through the chair, the expectation is the 300 families.
Thank you. Then the additional revenue that's been secured or could be directed to NFP, is that going to other programs instead of staying with NFP, through the chair?
Through the chair, primarily it's staying with NFP. I believe the additional funding sources are over a multi-year period to keep that funding effectively flat over the next couple of years. I believe I don't want to say we're committed to having it because we never know what the state or federal government's going to do regarding the dollars, but at this point in time, we anticipate that funding remaining the same for at least 2012 and 2013.
Thank you. Through the chair, then, is the funding also the same, and what is it for Building Healthy Children for 2011, 2012?
Through the chair, yes, it is the same.
And thank you. Through the chair, what's that amount?
Through the chair, it's $1.2 million.
Thank you. Under the juvenile justice adolescent care portion, on page 148, I think it's a new piece of data included in 2012 for, quote, non-secure detention care days per year, and that's estimated to drop from 6,000 in 2010 to 2,700 in 2012. I think this is probably due to our ATD efforts, but could I ask for an explanation about the drop and what the data is? Thank you. Through the chair.
Through you, Madam Chair, it is actually a direct reflection of our existing alternatives to detention work, as well as our planned alternatives to detention work.
Thank you. And I guess it's positive to see that huge decrease, really, and more than 50% decrease in that figure. How are we monitoring Are kids still being successful, I guess, is the bottom line question through the chair.
Through you, Madam Chair, absolutely. There's an incredible amount of monitoring that goes on with our alternatives to detention work. It is multifaceted. It includes the Department of Human Services, the Probation Department. There are schools involved in it, as well as several human service agencies, and we are carefully monitoring our work. It is our intention to keep our kids at home and with their families as often as possible without compromising public safety.
Thank you. Looking at the funding for juvenile justice facilities, over the past 3 years, there have been some jumps up and down. In 2010, I think it was 11.2 million. 2011, it went up to 14 million. Now we're back down to 11.8 million for 2012. Could you just explain what accounts for those jumps in funding amounts? Thank you. Through the chair.
Through the chair, can you provide us a reference point?
Sure. Page 165.
Through the chair, it's a combination of the rate going up and fewer children being placed in OCFS facilities at this point in time.
I'm sorry, can you just clarify what you mean about the rate going up through the chair?
Through the chair, it's a rate required for payment for services provided for an individual being in one of those facilities. The numbers of folks receiving that service is down. However, the charge for that service has increased over the last couple of years.
Thank you. Through the chair, I had a similar question about the JD Pins Care line fluctuating over the past few years. Is that the same answer through the chair?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you. Through the chair, and I know you touched on this briefly in the presentation, I think in a previous answer as well, regarding safety net, but can you explain the funding changes to me in safety net? Because now that there's nothing budgeted for state and federal aid for 2012, and it appears from the budget that the state's reducing reimbursement to 29% from 50% it used to be. I'd just like to understand how that program will work going forward. Through the chair.
Through the chair, I think you started off with what I thought was an incorrect statement. There is still state aid being funneled to the safety net program. That is the 29% that the state is now reimbursing us for these expenses. As part of the state budget, they reduced this program, which was a 50-50 split between the county and the state, to a 71% county share, 29% state share.
Thank you. Through the chair, is that expected to be permanent, the new cost shifting arrangement, or the new sharing arrangement?
Through the chair, we hope that that is the extent of the permanency to it, and it doesn't reduce, go down even further as far as the state reimbursement goes.
Thank you. Through the chair, then, so that really accounts for like approximately $12 million increase in the county cost for that program. Is that true? Is that the?
Through the chair, in round numbers, yes.
Thank you. Through the chair, I recall that budgeting for safety net is really driven by caseloads in a lot of, mostly. And I'm surprised to see, again, that there's a projected caseload decrease for 2012. I know that the past few years you've projected caseload decreases, but then when the actuals come in, the caseloads are actually much higher than what's projected. And that occurred again in 2011. So I would ask, why would a caseload projection be decreased at this point in time?
And I think through the chair, Commissioner Reed answered this previously, but we've noticed since approximately, I think it was April, significant declines in the population served under the safety net program. So we would anticipate on the average basis that these declines would continue through 2012 in order for us to meet our budgetary target.
Thank you. So even though the number now is 7,900 for this year and it had projected to be 7,300, you're confident that 7,600 is accurate for 2012?
Through the chair, the number that I have in front of me is 78, approximately 7,800 right now, and we are effectively believe in this projection that it will get to an average case load of 7,616.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to family assistance, again, similar question as to safety net. Can you just explain the shifting here in the formula and how the county costs have now gone down to zero?
Through the chair, this is what I tried to explain earlier and didn't do a great job of it. The family assistance portion, the funding was provided through one of the federal block grants for this particular program, and the excess that was not needed for this program was then required to go over to child welfare, I believe. And that was $7 million. Those were the two numbers that we spoke about when you asked the question on child welfare. So the funding switch is what we believe is to be temporary. The state has shifted its use of TANF funding and is fully financing family assistance at this point in time. But that it is anticipated that that is a temporary shift, and that ultimately the federal funding will go away to provide a county support for this particular program into the future.
Thank you. So through the chair, so we could be facing a situation then where this could be a temporary shift, whereas the changes in safety net could be permanent or worse, which would increase the county cost. Is that an accurate summary?
Through the chair, I believe that's what we all fear on this side of the table, yes.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair, similar question here regarding the caseloads. I know that you're projecting a slight increase, but I'm assuming you're comfortable with the caseloads that you're projecting, even though historically they have been a little under what the actuals, when the actuals come in.
Through the chair, yes.
Thank you. Regarding Medicaid, I have a question, which if it's not for this committee, that's fine. I don't fully understand this issue, but through the chair, my question is, in a case where a judge orders restitution, let's say in an assault case, and Medicaid is paying that restitution because the defendant is...
Can we just do the budget questions?
This is a budget question. It's about how much of that cost is, what is the cost of Medicaid to pay that restitution? I mean, what is our share of that? Or how much of it do we recoup from the defendant?
Through the chair, what I'm hearing this side is the local share of that particular instance that you cite, it would be zero. I guess this is probably an area where there's probably 1,000 answers to 1,000 questions, and I don't feel real comfortable giving you a specific answer, but our genuine understanding of the way that the program functions at this point in time is that would be no cost to the county.
Through the chair, and I don't fully understand it myself either, but could someone explain how there would be no cost? Is it just because of the intercept? Is that why you're saying that answer? Or is it actually there's no cost to local taxpayers? Or there wouldn't be any, I guess my question really is, would there be any savings if we pursued more aggressively getting the restitution from the defendant instead of allowing Medicaid to pay for it?
Through the chair, if I could ask, this might be a conversation better to have, and I understand what you're getting at, and I'm not trying to avoid the question as to what the net impact would be to the county, but I think there are some specifics that it looks as though you're looking at on a piece of paper, and it may be more appropriate for someone to specifically address those questions, and we can get those answered for you. But I don't believe there's no significant impact to the county from that, whether it be because of the intercept or because of how Medicaid dollars are now
costs are now shared with the county. I don't believe there's a significant impact to this budget based on that specific example, but I feel like I'm going out pretty far on a limb right now on that one because I just don't know the specifics of what you're speaking to.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to learn a little bit more about it between now and Ways and Means and follow up again. Thank you. Moving on to child care, what's the projection for 2012 in terms of number of children? I know you stated it in the presentation. 7,666, is that correct? Number of children for child care?
Through the chair.
Through the chair.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you. Through the chair, and what is the projection for children for 2011?
Through the chair, I believe we're talking about a potential approximately 200 children increase, but I'm looking through my notes trying to find, I don't have the exact number, but I do have my notes. Thank you. Through the chair, we can provide that number to you. We don't have it right here right now.
Any other questions, legislator?
Yes, thank you. Could I request also, and you probably can't see this from here, but I have a sheet here, the daycare statistics broken out by number of children in care by type of care that you've been willing to provide me in the past. Could I request this updated information?
Through the chair, Commissioner Reed and Deputy Commissioner Franklin both are shaking their heads, so I'm assuming yes. The answer is yes.
Thank you very much. I look forward to that. Regarding next year in our child care program, is the eligibility level projected to stay the same for the entire year?
Through the chair.
Through the chair.
Through the chair at this time, yes.
And through the chair, that's 165%, is that correct?
Through the chair, yes.
Thank you. Through the chair, is the quality differential projected to remain in 2012?
Through the chair, yes.
And through the chair, will the parent copay stay the same?
Through the chair, yes, and there are no rollover funds.
Thank you. One additional one. Through the chair, is that you're going to maintain the same policy in terms of paying for absences for providers?
Through the chair, that's a new one, but the answer is yes.
Thank you. And is there any market rate adjustment projected for 2012?
Through the chair.
Through the chair.
Through the chair, there was a 4.57% increase as of October 1st of 2011.
And through the chair, nothing then for 2012?
Through the chair, not at this time.
Thank you. Through the chair, our office has gotten a few calls recently regarding people who haven't been able to enroll in child care program, and there seems to be an uptick in the number of calls in the past month or so. Through the chair, is there been some change in policy or anything going on that you could enlighten us to, or is this just coincidental?
Through the chair, it's my understanding that we're getting to that point in time of the year where we begin to accept new subsidies, and folks are, what I'm being told is people are getting anxious about the availability of those subsidies and are starting to call our offices as well to find out when that will start to happen.
Thank you.
Once again, legislator, and it's just questions that pertain to this coming 2012 proposed budget. And we'll get the other questions later.
When later?
After the meeting, you can ask questions after.
Oh, in unfinished business, I can ask all the rest of my questions? You
Well,
won't object to them?
If you have a whole list of them, maybe we could consolidate them, or else maybe you could get some written answers back if they pertain.
Mm-hmm. This is budget review, Madam Chair. I appreciate your being lenient with me, but it is a large portion of our budget.
I understand
and you know
that.
I always have a lot of questions.
I understand.
Thank you. Regarding child care dollars, I understand that for next year, the amount of money in child care dollars, I think the facilitated enrollment grant is dropping. Are we still using this fund primarily to fund families between 165 and 275% eligibility level, or are we going to be using these funds to supplement families below 165%?
Through the chair.
Through the chair.
Through the chair, the former, so the first part of your question.
Thank you. And are families currently able to enroll in child care dollars at this time, or is that enrollment on hold? Through the chair.
Through the chair, that enrollment is on hold.
Thank you. When do you expect to open that up through the chair?
Through the chair, it's anticipated to be December 1st.
Thank you. In reading the budget, the low-income child care has been closed to new families since October in 2010, I believe so. At this point in time, do you expect to open that enrollment up at any point through the chair?
Through the chair, yes.
Through the chair, when?
Through the chair, it could be anytime between Thursday of this week and February 1st.
Through the chair, that's like a 5-month period. I guess it's less than that, 3-month period. Do you have any more precise prediction through the chair?
Through the chair, no.
Through the chair, what's the number of children or families that have been turned away because this program has been closed for the past year?
Through the chair, approximately 150 per month.
I'm sorry, through the chair, 150 per month, is that accurate?
Through the chair, that's accurate.
Thank you. Do you maintain any sort of waiting list through the chair?
Legislator Andrews, can we get to those after? We're just talking about the proposed 2012 budget.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other, does anyone
I do have some other questions.
Okay.
I'm reading to get to
Okay.
the really relevant
Okay,
ones.
fine.
Through the chair, on page 142, there is a statement, I think, under objectives for 2012 regarding a building bridges proposal to the New York State OCFS for a foster care rate waiver. Through the chair, could someone just explain what that is?
Through the chair, in that particular negotiation with the state, one of the things we're trying to do is to actually ask for a waiver where we can offer a case rate for a client as opposed to a daily rate for the amount of time that a child would be placed in an out-of-home placement in an attempt to incentivize our providers to actually get the children into an alternative to detention program. It's a piece of our continuum of services through alternatives to detention.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm assuming then the case rate would be cheaper to the county than the current daily rate. Is that true?
Through the chair, that's our assumption, is that it would work out to be less expensive.
Any other questions? Oh, okay.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question, if I may, through the chair. Ms. Reed, could you explain again what Ms. Andrews just asked you in that particular rate and what's being delivered for the maintenance rate is what I would call it? daily versus a qualified piece. I'm not using the right word, but it's a set rate. Hourly rate is one way to put it, or rate for service per job. Could you just explain, has this been an ongoing process that we've been doing, or is this new? Through the chair. The use of the rate per day versus the daily case rate. Excuse me. Thank you.
Through the chair, daily rate is a typical way that
Yes.
we would pay for a child. We'd pay for the number of days the child was in placement. We would be moving in the Building Bridges program to a capitated rate, where there would be a set rate for that child to be provided services.
Thank you. So if I understand it, we are moving to a different process of funding.
Through the chair, yes.
Through the chair, do we have any background on how this has worked in other areas, say other agencies?
Through the chair, we could look and get you some research on that. I mean, this is we're asking the state for a pilot program on this. It's a piece of our initiative, newly created initiative. Certainly, it's designed specifically, as I said before, to incentivize the provider to utilize their alternative to detention. What we know right now is that we are placing youth that in our assessment are not necessarily appropriate for placement, and we are underutilizing some of the alternatives to detention. This provides an incentive to utilize more of the alternatives to detention and promotes the basic tenets that we have for how we address juvenile justice and pieces of Project SAVE. It's like another step in the Project SAVE concept.
Okay, thank you. And when would you be reevaluating this?
Well, through the chair, we first have to get the state to agree to the waiver. And that's something that we will apply for and negotiate with the state in the 2012 year.
Thank you. Understood. I would think I'll ask that question later. Thank you.
Are there any other questions pertaining to the 2012 proposed budget? Legislator Andrews.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the Youth Bureau, this was spoken about in the presentation, a decrease in funding about $600,000, which I understand comes mostly from the state. Given that cut, how do you decide or what programs are going to be impacted or reduced because of the reduced funding through the chair?
Through the chair, during the process of looking at this, we attempted to reduce all of the contracts at an equal amount across the board.
Okay, through the chair, could I request then a list of the contracts and their funding amounts for 2011 and 2012?
Through the chair, yes, we can.
Thank you. Looking specifically at the runaway and homeless youth funding, this is dropped, and the number of runaway and homeless youth served is going to almost be cut in half in 2012. Through the chair, do you have any concerns? I mean, what's going to happen to these children who probably aren't going away, but now we won't be able to meet their needs?
Through the chair, yes, of course we have significant concern about youth we would be unable to provide services for. It's important for you to know that while we have endured substantial cuts to the Youth Bureau over the last 4 years, we have worked to prioritize the funding to runaway and homeless youth programs, and overall we've tried to allocate a larger cut to other services other than the runaway and homeless youth programs. Certainly it's a concern that we have, that while the state has not declared it themselves, they are behaving out the elimination of funding for a youth bureau. And as a result of that, we have worked very, very closely with Bob Zink, who is our director of the Youth Bureau, on a redesign that would allow us to better position ourselves to accommodate youth services for the county without waiting for additional cuts to occur by New York State. I fully anticipate that there will be additional cuts, and we are working proactively to address that. With regard to runaway and homeless youth, as Dr. Kazarowski referenced, we fund programs for runaway and homeless youth through the Youth Bureau, but we actually purchase housing for runaway and homeless youth through the Division of Financial Assistance. So even though there is the Youth Bureau is experiencing those cuts, and the agencies that are funded through them are experiencing those cuts, we have an obligation to provide emergency housing, and that is provided and continues to be provided through the Financial Assistance Division.
Thank you. Through the chair, are there any county funds to go to support this area of the budget? Like runaway and homeless youth specifically?
Through the chair, we can provide the breakdown. The consensus is there is local dollars here, but we'll get the information to you.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, then just one last question in this area. If that emergency housing is mostly provided through, I think you said the family assistance, you might have said, yeah, I think family assistance. What specifically then is this funding in this area used for runaway homeless youth?
Through the chair, is your question, what does the Youth Bureau funding provide for runaway and homeless youth? For case management and services like that the agency is providing as a wraparound service to the youth.
Thank you. Just had a couple of questions under public health as well. Last year we did devote some significant amount of time to talking about the increased number of youth who had been diagnosed as HIV positive in our community. I think it was about this time of year that data came out. So through the chair, Dr. Doniger, do you have any data yet for 2011 in terms of youth diagnosed with HIV?
Through you, Madam Chair, we have seen a reduction in the number of new cases of HIV in patients under the age of 25. So the community coalition that has worked on this is very pleased with this, and there probably will be some media coverage of this in the next couple of days related to World AIDS Day.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm really happy to hear that. Would you be able to provide some more specifics perhaps after your media event so we could see what those figures are?
What I would like to do is wait until we finish the year 2011 and then give you the information for each year. I'm less comfortable going quarter by quarter because the numbers are so small.
That's fine. Thank you. And through the chair, just to confirm, the county doesn't make a financial contribution to that community coalition, correct? I know we're partners, but we don't contribute anything.
Through you, Madam Chair, we don't commit any dollars, but we are part of the coalition and work with the other partners on various projects.
Thank you. And I'm assuming in 2012 there's no commitment of dollars to that either, through the chair.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. I had a question just in listening to the news and some other states and governments are doing in terms of the HPV vaccine. Is this anything that the county has ever contemplated requiring for girls, or is that something that we wouldn't? It's the wrong level of government to even inquire about this.
Can we ask that question
Sure.
after?
Do you want me to wait and then ask it again in a few minutes?
Sure.
Okay.
I'd like to just finish the 2012 budget if we could.
Thank
Proposed
you.
budget.
All right. Is there, in the 2012 budget, through the chair, is there any funding specifically for teenage pregnancy prevention programs?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, not specifically with that title. Many of our maternal and child health programs, though, have a component related to teen pregnancy prevention. Most notably, NFP is one of the major outcomes that we look at is reducing second pregnancies.
Thank you. Under the Special Children's Services Earlier Intervention, it was stated in the presentation that the cost has decreased in 2012 and really the past couple of years, I guess in part because of the reduction in the state reimbursement rates to providers. Is that the entire reason, or is that the entire reason for the reduction, through the chair?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's the main reason. There are lots of little pieces of the formula for determining whether the cost to the county goes up or down. But those rate decreases to the providers were substantial, and they far outweigh any of the other factors.
Thank you. Through the chair, are we, because of those reductions in rates, which I know are coming from the state, but are we losing any service providers because the rates are getting too low?
Through you, Madam Chair, there are some services that we are feeling the pressure, OT, PT, a couple of other specialties. We are finding it difficult to find providers, but up to this point, we've been able to, using creativity and lots of work on the part of the service coordinator staff, been able to identify providers for all the children that are in these programs. We'll just have to see what happens as the next state budget cycle goes ahead, whether the rates are going to be changing. We're monitoring this very closely, and we are very concerned about it.
Okay, thank you. Earlier in the year, actually, my colleague, Legislator Cayley, and I attended a meeting with early intervention providers, and there was some concern at that meeting raised regarding reimbursement from the county for services. At this point in time, are there any lingering concerns or payments to providers up to date? Has that been remedied through the chair?
Through the chair, from a reimbursement standpoint, I'm not aware of any delays this year. So if there are specifics, if you could bring them to our attention, but we are not in any way, shape, or form withholding payments to providers for any services at this point in time.
Great, thank you. Could I also request through the chair the number of children that received early intervention services for the past 3 years, or 2010, 2011, and projections for 2012? And in addition to that, I'd love to see the breakdown of by location or town or however you could do this, if possible, to get a sense of where most of the children reside who are receiving services. Is that
Legislator Andrews, can we just do that after? We're still in the 2012.
It is actually, yes, that's fine. I'll ask it again in a few minutes. Okay. Through the chair, under maternal and child health on page 238, charges to DHS are dropping from 1.4 million to 0. Why would that occur?
Through the chair.
Through you.
Go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair, the COPS program has ended. When the COPS program was in place, the funding for COPS would come into the Department of Social Services. It would leverage local dollars, and then the money would be transferred over to the county health department. Since that's ended, we no longer have that transfer.
Thank you. Through the chair, that's ending from the state, correct? There's no more COPS at all then in 2012?
Through the chair, that is an assumption on our part, but we will wait as the state further goes through its budget process to determine if that's been completely cut for 2012.
Thank you. And then on page 232, the appropriation is dropping from 4.2 million in 2010 to 2.4 million in 2012. Why would that be occurring?
Through the chair.
Through the chair, I apologize. Can you repeat the page number?
232.
And through the chair, now the question.
Why the appropriation is dropping from 4.2 million to 2.4 million in 2012.
Through the chair.
Oh, sorry, that's fine, I can skip that question. That's fine. Under the public health fees on page 200, or starting around 241, there are a lot of fees that are increasing in the 2012 budget. How is it determined which fees would increase and which ones would stay the same? And how much additional revenue is projected to be received from the increase in fees in 2012 through the chair?
Through the chair, I think, as you're probably well aware of, there was a loss of Article 6 funding for the medical examiner's office in the state budget this past year. And so what we've done here is attempted to make sure that we are getting our costs recovered that the medical examiner provides without that Article 36 funding. And we anticipate, I believe, roughly around $250,000 of additional revenue based on this new fee structure. And that will be a combination of both fees for services and contracts with the other counties that we contract with.
Thank you. And through the chair, would that additional 250 then make up what you've lost from the Article 6 funding?
Through the chair, it's an attempt to start, but it does not make up the complete loss of Article 6 funding.
Thank you. And then just one last question. In your slide regarding the Office of Mental Health, my question through the chair is which agency contracts were cut? I think you stated during the presentation that some were cut, and if I could just request a listing of what the funding levels that were cut.
Through the chair, we can provide that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the answers this evening. I look forward to the follow-up information and continuing the dialogue. But thank you for your patience and time and the energy you've put into preparing this budget throughout the year.
Thank you, Legislator Andrews. Any other questions on the budget? Legislator Cayley, on the 2012 budget, proposed budget. Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you. On page 241, just going to the fee, I didn't notice before, some of these have risen drastically, and understood when you lose funding, you need to go back and regain it. Not to be flip, but some of the functions of the coroner are dealt with from different counties. Are we the only game in town? In other words, do we expect that we will not lose revenue from counties or persons in counties that might have come to this area that will now go the other direction?
Through the chairs, that's always a risk, but we do not anticipate losing those.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Everyone's happy now? Okay. Again, thank you, Scott, for that presentation, for answering all the questions, to Commissioner Reed, Dr. Doniger, everyone else who answered questions. Very appreciate all the work that went into that. The next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. You have before you the October 25th, 2011 minutes. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day. New business. I would like to ask for a motion to move the agenda as a whole, except for referral number 280, as there's an amendment to that. If that would, if I could get a motion and a move in a second. Moved by Dr. Quattro and second by Legislator Andrews.
Chairwoman, I have questions regarding on a lot of the items on the agenda, so I'd rather not move it.
On each of them.
Thank you.
I guess we should.
We could move some specific referrals if you'd like to do it that way.
Actually, I would like to. Which ones I would like to move? Seeing that we're going on like 3 hours, I was hoping that we could move a few of them, at least. If that,
We could move.
I was thinking everything but number 280.
I have questions on 269, 274, 275, 277, 278, and 279.
Let's go through them all. Absolutely. Let's do that. Clerk, if you'd like to.
Okay. Referral 11-268.
Moved by Legislator Rocco, second by Legislator Quattro. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Next item.
Referral 11-269.
Moved by Legislator Quattro, second by Legislator Daniele. Any discussion? Legislator Andrews.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, how many people are served by this grant? Through the chair.
Through you, Madam Chair, there are approximately 80 to 100 newly diagnosed cases of HIV a year, and we have interaction with approximately 150 to 250 contacts identified to those new cases.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 11-270. Acceptance.
Moved by Legislator Daniele, second by Legislator Rocco. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 11-271.
Moved by Legislator Rocco, second by Legislator Quattro. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 11-272. Acceptance of a grant from the New York State.
Moved by Legislator Quattro, second by Legislator Daniele. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Item carries. Next item.
Referral 11-273. Acceptance of a grant.
Moved by Legislator Daniele, second by Legislator Rocco. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Item carries.
Referral 11-274.
Next, moved by Legislator Rocco, second by Legislator Quattro. Any discussion? Legislator Andrews.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to administration, this is the first year we've had this grant. I'm curious about its purpose. I mean, I can read here, it's to create a model partnership between the libraries and health department. But could someone just explain a little bit in more further detail why this is needed and what it's supposed to do?
Through you, Madam Chair, this is really a pilot project. I can see how one might wonder how a library might be able to help with emergency response. In some sectors of the city, there really are very few institutions that are in place that have a lot of contact with the residents. And in some neighborhoods, the local library is a place where people go and get information. And so we're trying as an experiment to see if we can use that resource in the city of Rochester. And with one particular public library, we'll make information available, various public health emergency preparedness materials will be available. We'll train the library staff to answer questions about how people should respond in the event of an emergency. We'll have some training courses that will be used by some of the local teams that provide emergency response in the neighborhood where this library is located, and we'll ask them to, the staff at the library, to participate in some disaster response planning to see if they give us a different perspective than we currently have.
Thank you. How did you choose our net library?
Through you, Madam Chair, this came up very quickly. We had been working with them based on a community meeting that we had. They basically approached us and asked if we would be interested in going ahead and applying for this grant. We needed to be the applicant.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 11-275.
Moved by legislator Quattro, second by legislator Daniele. Any discussion? Legislator Andrews.
Through the chair, could I just request a list of the breakdown of the agency contracts for the $3.5 million for this referral, please?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, we can provide that.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 11-276.
Moved by legislator Daniele, second by legislator Rocco. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 11-277.
Moved by legislator Rocco, second by legislator Quattro. Any discussion? Legislator Andrews.
Through the chair, I just would like to ask how much unspent, it refers to unspent funding. It's how much it was unspent from previous years.
Through the chair, we'll have to provide that answer to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 11-278.
Moved by legislator Quattro, second by legislator Daniele. Any discussion on this? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 11-279.
Moved by legislator Daniele, second by legislator Rocco. Any discussion on this? Legislator Andrews.
Through you, I'm just interested in what, this is the second year of this project. What did we learn in the first year, and how is it going?
Through you, Madam Chair, this particular grant is offering us the opportunity to open dialogue about how we approach our work with regard to our consumers, and in particular how we approach our work with regard to consumers of a culture other than the one that the caseworker is. And we have just begun, the first year we were doing dialogue and some research on what we wanted to address as a particular issue of concern for us. This second year we have begun to actually train our staff on looking at disproportionate minority issues, and have hired a consultant to do that training for all of our Children and Family Services staff.
Thank you. Through the chair, could you share what you identified as your particular area of concern?
Our particular area of concern is the number of youth of color that are in foster care placement.
Thank you. Do you feel that participating in the project is going to be useful to you and your staff?
To you, Madam Chair, I think it's been extraordinarily helpful already.
Great. Thank you very much.
All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 11-280.
Moved by legislator Rocco, second by legislator Quattro. And could we have an amendment to this resolution? I believe everyone received one on in the committee. You did not receive the amendment. It's just a typo, actually, in this amendment. There was a typo under the amend the resolution 117. It really should be 177. Do you want time to look at this? As opposed to 117. Jerry, maybe I would let Jerry, would you like to address this through?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize if individual legislators didn't receive this. We did send a letter up to the members of the committee, I believe yesterday, regarding this. But there was a typographical error, and specific legislative action would need to be amended to change the amended resolution from 117 to 177. That was simply a typographical error. We would respectfully request that amendment.
Thank you. Could I have a move by legislator, the amendment is moved by legislator Quattro, second by legislator Daniele. Could we vote on the amendment? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Now we can go back to the original resolution. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, item carries. Thank you. Next item.
Referral 11-287.
Moved by Legislator Quattro, second by Legislator Daniele. Any discussion on this? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Are there any other matters that would like to come before this committee? Legislator Andrews.
Don't want to
Now's
let you
your
down,
chance.
Chairwoman Draw.
Thank you.
I just have two follow-ups for this at this point in time. I would like to talk a little bit about the HPV vaccine. Having heard some about it in the news recently, I'm not sure if it's something the county would be able to really require for girls or not, or if the doctor has an opinion on it, but I would be interested in talking about that and in his opinion through the chair.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, it really is at the state level that immunization requirements for school are set. And so I don't believe that we would be authorized to legislate in that area.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. The other area, if I can continue through you, Madam Chair, is to follow up and request the number of children who received services under the Special Children's Services or Earlier Intervention Services for 2010, 11, and 12, as well as, if possible, some breakdown geographically in the county in terms of where those children were from. I don't care necessarily if it's by zip code or town or village, or if you have it somehow. Is that possible?
We can provide that. We actually got a similar request from the Children's Agenda recently, and we're starting to look at it. I'm not sure exactly how quickly we can provide that, though. We have raw numbers for so far this year, but I think we probably need to look at a couple of years and aggregate them so that we don't get caught in looking at small numbers.
Okay, that would be fine. Just be interested in seeing it. Thank you very much. That's
Thank
it for
you.
now.
Seeing no further business, then the meeting of the November 29, 2011 Human Services Committee stands adjourned. The next committee meeting will be announced after